I think it is probably the most terrifying medium in the world. I can't tell you how often when they say 30 seconds to air, I think to myself, oh, what am I doing here? And I wish I could just set something on fire.
Behind the sparkle and spells of Bewitched lies a secret moment that quietly ended an era. A scene fans still whisper was buried by the network. But what if the real reason for its disappearance was something no camera ever caught? Was there a scene too controversial to air? A fight that fractured the set? Or a silent goodbye disguised as TV magic?
I'm a witch.
That's wonderful. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Now, I am a witch. A real, house-haunting, broom-riding, cauldron-stirring witch.
Today, we'll uncover the shocking truth behind the myth. Through cast interviews, insider accounts, and production history, we'll separate rumor from reality to reveal the real moment that ended Bewitched. The scene that never aired. Every great show has its myths, and for Bewitched, one of the most enduring is the rumor of an infamous final scene. A moment supposedly so shocking, the network refused to air it. Fans have speculated for decades. Was it a controversial line, a hidden message from Elizabeth Montgomery, or a behind-the-scenes outburst caught on film? The truth, however, is far subtler and far more human. The so-called scene that ended Bewitched never actually existed, not on any reel, not in any script. It was a metaphor born from heartbreak, exhaustion, and a quiet decision that changed television forever. During its 8th season, Bewitched was still a hit. ABC had even renewed the series for 2 additional seasons. But beneath the magic and laughter, things were falling apart. Elizabeth Montgomery, who played the charming witch Samantha Stevens, was living through a real-life unraveling of her own. Her marriage to producer Bill Asher was crumbling. Their partnership had powered the show from the beginning, blending her on-screen charisma with his behind-the-camera vision. Yet, as their relationship soured, the chemistry that fueled Bewitched began to fade. Today, cast members and crew members were reflecting on the tension in the air. More time was taken in shooting, directions were brusque, and whenever Montgomery purported to be warm, it was tinged with weary tones. To the audience, Samantha still seemed to be that perfectly integrated blend of a suburban lady with magical mischief. But on her set, Elizabeth was fatigued, tired of wiggling her nose, tired of recycled scripts, and tired of pretending Bewitched's world still felt enchanted. When she pointedly told the network that she would not return to do an additional season, it was not done in rebellion or a scandalous act. It was only an understated act of closure. In hushed silence, the legend of the infamous scene grew. Fans would not believe that something so beloved as Bewitched could just stop simply because its star walked away. So rumors filled in all the spaces with talk of secret tapes. A scene in which Samantha renounced all her magic powers forever. Even speculation that an unaired episode contained hidden symbolism regarding Montgomery's marriage. But archival records, studio logs, and production notes show no missing footage, no banned episode. What really disappeared was something much less tangible: the will to continue the illusion. Although most shows leave fans with some closure, Bewitched isn't one of them, ending mid-spell with no resolution for its magic. In that abrupt ending, viewers turned their desire for closure into myth. The unscrambled plot accounted for the way too rapid disappearance. In the end, the real infamous scene wasn't filmed on set. It played out behind the scenes, in dressing rooms and private phone calls, in the quiet heartbreak between 2 people who built a dream world together and could no longer sustain it. It was every actor's and producer's worst nightmare one, where somebody says, It's time to stop. If it wasn't a scandal on camera, then what moment on set revealed that the magic was fading? When the set went still. There are silences on a television set that say more than words ever could. The crew of Bewitched felt it, the kind of hush that hangs in the air when a show's spirit begins to dim. It wasn't just about the long hours or complex special effects. Something deeper had shifted. What had once been a lively, laughing family of cast and crew had turned somber. The magic that once filled the studio with energy was being replaced by fatigue, quiet tension, and a sense of finality no one dared speak aloud. At its height, Bewitched was a masterclass in timing. Each effect, each trick, Samantha's twitch, Endora's shimmer, or a broom appearing out of thin air, required painstaking precision. Elizabeth Montgomery would hold her arms frozen for minutes while crew members swapped props, repositioned furniture, or rewound film to create the illusion of magic. But by the show's later seasons, the physical and emotional toll was catching up. Those light-hearted gestures that had once charmed millions now came with visible strain. Between takes, Montgomery often stood silently, shoulders tight, waiting for the director's signal. What audiences saw as effortless charm was actually the result of gritted endurance. The tension rolled off her back. The loss of the original Darren, Dick York, had left a wound that never truly healed. Warm, comedic energy formed the hallmark of early seasons, but came crashing down like that when he collapsed on set after a long battle with chronic pain from a spinal injury sustained even before. Left helpless by the sight of his being carried away, the cast members knew that he would not return anymore. The split was all professional, but truth be told, everyone knew the saying, "Not the same Bewitched again," would apply. When Dick Sargent stepped up, he brought his own charm, but the chemistry had shifted. Montgomery is best trying to keep that spark flying, but the laughter is feeling just a bit more forced. The rhythm slower. The crew, instead, tried to carry on as if the magic were for real. But real life had different ideas. One afternoon, during the shooting of an episode, a filmed production suddenly came to a standstill. Through the studio intercom, the announcement came. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Cast and crew froze as they stopped in their tracks. Silence. The laughter, lightness, the illusion of suburban perfection all vanished as it gave way to the heaviness of that moment. Even years later, it could be remembered by those who had been there as the eerily still moment that followed. In that exquisite, shared acknowledgement, there was a recognition. The outside world was far darker than anything that could be found in their scripts. For a show built on fantasy, that intrusion of reality felt like a spell breaking. This burnout came not only from the labor, but also from the sameness of it all. By the 8th season, the average episode was simply a repackaged, strung-together queue of plot elements, liberated and reused word for word in big chunks to save time and money. Ironically, even Montgomery could note it. Here is magic gone to seed, locked in a loop of its own. Bewitched's radiant imagination had become a mechanical routine. But to the viewing public, the illusion still worked. To everyone else backstage, however, it was pretty apparent. The set was silent, not because the show had ended, but because the people who were inside it ran out of wonder. Every twitch, every trick, and every laugh cue became heavier, as if from an echo of the happier moments. The silences between takes grew longer. Smiles took more effort. That stillness on set was only the beginning. Soon, real life would pull the show apart from within. The marriage that broke the spell. Behind every spellbinding illusion, there's a truth most viewers never see, and for Bewitched, that truth was heartbreak. Elizabeth Montgomery, the shining star who brought Samantha Stevens to life, wasn't just the face of the show. She was its heartbeat. But by the later seasons, her marriage to producer Bill Asher, the man who helped craft that magic, was unraveling. What began as a creative partnership rooted in love and laughter had quietly transformed into emotional distance and exhaustion. The chemistry that once powered both their personal and professional lives was fading fast, and as it did, so did the spark that kept Bewitched alive. When Bewitched first began, Montgomery and Asher were the picture of Hollywood synergy. She embodied the sweet yet spirited witch who longed for normalcy, while Asher, directing and producing, shaped the show's tone with warmth and precision. They worked seamlessly, building a fantasy world that felt as real as it was charming. But the pressure of maintaining that image both on and off screen was immense. Success brought fame, but it also brought strain. Asher's long hours on set, paired with Montgomery's growing frustration over creative limitations, began to form cracks in their marriage. Closer to the couple, however, were witnesses to the shift. The two were still professional currents set in Montgomery and Asher, but laughter had turned forced from casual. Arguments about what constituted a script, direction, and pacing became regular occurrences. Old, overworked stories are some of the ideas she desires freshened up. They include formulas that have worked for Asher in past seasons. Creative differences or clashes between the two went beyond creativity. The personal side, Montgomery, wanted new roles because she is seeking to redefine herself outside the shadow of Asher. Their co-stars knew what the price was. Agnes Moorehead, the fierce and loving Endora, was very protective of Montgomery and sensed her growing bad feelings. Caught between duty and desire is how her friends described her, there for the audience and colleagues, but wanting to get out of a life that was not hers anymore. By the 8th season, the separation wasn't simply emotional. Bill and Elizabeth lived apart, with communication limited to production meetings. What had begun as one of the most successful partnerships in television history had now become a silent standoff. Every single day in Montgomery began with a balance beam. As Samantha, she played the devoted wife trying to combine her husband's mundane world with her own magical one. She was trying to have that same glittery, glamorous outside world picture of being the perfect TV wife that remained in stark contrast to her private life and the ugly truth of her marriage on the rocks. Ironically, Bewitched had always been about compromise in love, and Montgomery was mirroring that theme much too literally. Finally, she left the show, but it was not a dramatized walkout. It was a wise choice. She had sacrificed 8 years of her life for a role that at the same time had defined her. It confined her in a box. To end Bewitched was more than ending the show, for it was all about claiming her identity back. It was a closure, not only for an iconic era, but also from a long relationship wherein it had been built. The notorious scene, which fans fantasize explosive, tirade, a meltdown conjuring, but not on tape, is right between the two people who can't pretend anymore that the magic is real. It is the moment Montgomery decided to choose herself, not the illusion. But even as Montgomery prepared to walk away, the network had one last plan to keep the magic alive, and it would backfire spectacularly. The switch that split the audience. For years, Bewitched had charmed viewers with its whimsical humor and irresistible chemistry between Samantha and her mortal husband, Darren Stevens. But midway through its run, the show faced a challenge that no spell could fix: the loss of Dick York, the original Darren. His exit wasn't planned, and his replacement became one of television's most talked-about transitions. It was the switch that split the audience and quietly marked the beginning of the end. York's departure was tragic and unavoidable. Years before joining Bewitched, he had suffered a debilitating back injury while filming another project. By the late 1960s, the pain had grown unbearable. The easygoing warmth that made his Darren so beloved was increasingly hard to sustain as his health deteriorated. To manage the pain, York relied on heavy medication, but it was a losing battle. Then, one day, during filming, he collapsed on set. The cast froze. Production halted. He was carried out and never returned. The crew knew they had lost not just an actor, but part of the show's heart. The producers had no choice: cancel a profitable show or try to find a replacement. BC and Bill Asher decided to go for the second option. Dick Sargent, the studio's original choice long ago, was brought in to take over as Darren. On paper, it made sense. He was an accomplished actor, a consummate professional, and willing to do the job. In practice, the change broke the spell that had been sustaining Bewitched from the start. The difference was immediately noticed by the fans. York's Darren was boyish, expressive, and at times silly out of endearment toward his wife's powers. Sargent's Darren was grounded, cool, subtly distant. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just a different groove he played into. But audiences were not accustomed to such a dramatic casting alteration for a lead in the 1960s, so it became jarring for them. Some viewers wrote in complaint that Darren looked different from what he used to look like, that he appeared humored or stiffer or less in love. Others defended Sargent, arguing that the charm of the show ought not depend on one individual actor. However, the division was clear. Bewitched was now a different show. Impact rippled through the production. Though Elizabeth Montgomery was friendly with Sargent, she found it more difficult to rekindle sparks with him. She had developed an ease over the years with York, who naturally improvised in a way reminiscent of her own style. Sargent was more technical, efficient, but not electric. Some scenes required multiple takes, and even the banter between married couples felt more scripted than spontaneous. Meanwhile, to stretch budgets and meet deadlines, the producers began literally recycling entire scripts from previous seasons, changing the minor details. The repeated descriptors were easily noted by old-time fans. Once fresh storylines now seemed overused. Critics began to wonder whether the chatterbox was all out of ideas. The magic now seemed to have become mechanical. Sargent faced the situation with dignity. He knew he had entered an impossible situation, but he remained professional and friendly until the bitter end. But the damage was already done. The emotional bond the viewers had once held for the Stevenses was fraying, and even the ABC suits realized the ratings were falling. It wasn't just that the actors changed, the whole feeling changed. Bewitched was always this subtle balance of fantasy against reality. When that balance began to vary, so did the audience's perception. Suddenly, the pristine mirage began to shatter, revealing all the fatigue and exhaustion underneath, and just when producers thought they could cast another spell to save it, one decision sealed the show's fate forever. The legend left behind. When Bewitched finally disappeared from television in 1972, there was no grand farewell, no dramatic final spell, and no closure for millions of devoted viewers. The end arrived quietly, so quietly that many fans didn't even realize they were watching the last episode. There was no announcement, no goodbye moment, and certainly no resolution to the story of Samantha, Darren, and their magical family. After 8 years of enchanting television, the show simply faded out, as if it had twitched itself out of existence. That understated ending would become one of television's most haunting disappearances and the seed of a lasting legend. The final episode aired like any other, light, humorous, and full of whimsical charm. But behind the scenes, the cast and crew already knew it was over. Elizabeth Montgomery had told ABC she would not return, and without her, there was no Bewitched. She wasn't just the star, she was the soul of the show. Yet, out of respect for her privacy and the sensitivity of her ongoing divorce from producer Bill Asher, the network chose to keep her decision quiet. They aired the last episodes as if the show were still alive, leaving fans unaware that the magic had already ended. This very strange, almost ghostly ending gave rise to one of the most enduring television myths: the scene that ended Bewitched. Fans who could not believe that the show would just disappear took to speculating about the filming of an unconventional final scene, which had then been locked away by the network. Rumors spread that Samantha had renounced magic in the censored finale, or that the last scene echoed Montgomery's real-life struggles. Others hinted that a reel of footage had been stashed away because it was too emotional or too personal. Yet archival records, production logs, and interviews with cast members all affirmed the same thing: there was no final scene. It was not censorship that slain Bewitched, it was the silence. The network had rerun episodes out of order from earlier seasons, contributing to the larger myth of a missing finale. As fans sought to understand the non-finale, those who witnessed that last season knew what the public had known. The show had already lost its heartbeat long before the cameras stopped rolling. The illusion of enchantment had stretched to its breaking point, and the woman who made it happen was starting to break free. The lore surrounding Bewitched only enlarged after the final fade. This infamous scene became the stuff of pop folklore, a symbol not just of Bewitched's mystery, but of the reaffirmation of the precarious line dividing fantasy and reality. The graceful exit of Elizabeth Montgomery became a romanticized portrayal of defiance, a woman taking control of her destiny in an industry primarily run by men. In a way, that myth carried its own truth. Bewitched ended, not in scandal, but with strength. The legend of the lost scene has kept fans guessing for decades. Was it ever real, or just a story we created to keep the magic alive? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truth behind this classic show, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more behind-the-scenes revelations, and don't miss our next feature on TV endings that shocked the world.